Today marks 80 years to the infamous Wannsee conference, the meeting in which 15 high-ranking Nazi officials were presented with the final solution, the plan to exterminate the Jewish people. No day is more fitting for the United Nations General Assembly to show its unanimous support for such an apt resolution. Our fight to ensure the memory of the victims whose fates were sealed 80 years ago is a fight that must be fought as a united body. After all, being vigilant about history today helps prevent the tragedies of tomorrow. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
The UN resolution the ambassador of Israel mentioned here was the resolution against the denial of the Holocaust and the falsification of its history. The 193 members of the UN General Assembly adopted the historic resolution authored by Israel and Germany on January 20th without a vote. Only Iran distanced itself from it. According to a survey by the World Jewish Congress, 1 in 5 adult Germans think anti-Semitically. Among 18 to 29-year-olds, it is even almost 1 in 3. The corona pandemic acts as an accelerant and has made anti-Semitism more socially acceptable. At the same time, knowledge about the Holocaust is dwindling, the Jewish World Congress said. Hatred of Jews is growing. The second part of my conversation with Dr. Leon Saltiel, now here on EWTN TV UN Blog.
It's time to stop talking about anti-Semitism. The word has lost its meaning. Call someone an anti-Semite today, and people will respond with a shrug, an eye roll. No one is embarrassed anymore when they're called an anti-Semite. Anti-Semitism must be called what it really is, Jew hatred. If you attack Jewish students on campus, you're a Jew hater. If you say Israel shouldn't exist, you're a Jew hater. Calling it what it really is, that's how we'll start to defeat it. Let's stop calling it anti-Semitism when it really is Jew hatred. Share this video if you believe in calling this evil by its real name, Jew hatred.
I'm now back in Geneva with Dr. Leon Saltiel of the World Jewish Congress. Greetings, Dr. Saltiel.
Good afternoon, Christian. Thank you for having me.
As we have just heard, your President Ronald S. Lauder demands that the word anti-Semitism be replaced by the term hatred of Jews, because it better describes the phenomenon and thus helps in the fight against it.
Indeed, and it's important to frame this statement by our President, Ambassador Lauder, in a whole context of rising anti-Semitism around the world. Unfortunately, people thought after the Holocaust that anti-Semitism would die, but unfortunately it hasn't died. It's still alive and around us, and it's multiplying, it's changing its face and its manifestations. And we saw it with the COVID pandemic, how it has increased and unfortunately also now propagated via the social media. So anti-Semitism is an issue that affects Jews around the world. It's a priority issue for the World Jewish Congress. So in that respect, our president wanted to frame the debate more clearly. You may know, Christian, that anti-Semitism was actually coined by an anti-Semite. The word itself, to describe the phenomenon of discrimination and hatred against Jews. And often, you know, when you say, for example, anti-Christian or anti-Muslim, anti is who you are, the second phrase is who you are against. So Semitism, the people you are against, actually doesn't exist. Semites are a linguistic group, they are not an ethnic group. And it's a group of languages that includes also Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, and others. So often other people confuse the word Semitism with also including the Arabs. So because the term anti-Semitism is not very clear, and because of its historical trajectory, Ambassador Lauder wanted to be more crystal clear about what we're trying to achieve. We try to stop hatred against Jews. And if you say, I'm trying to stop anti-Semitism, the people on the street or the little child at school, they not understand who are the Semites that we're trying to stop hatred against. Are they the Jews? Are they the Arabs? Are they all of them? Anti-Jewish hatred is clear. It's against the Jews. So that's what he tried to show, and that's what we are trying to tell all the European capitals and all around the world, that you need to work to stop the hatred against the Jews.
The hatred against Jews, is that a hatred directed against the ethnic group or the religion?
I think it's anti-Semitism or Jew hatred is a very complex phenomenon with going back thousands of years, unfortunately. And it's true to say, I think it's true to say that it's both. It has been both a manifestation of religious intolerance. It's also related to ethnic grounds. And often these are interrelated. Historically, for example, the Jews were a people living in the diaspora as part of a wider community, be it in the Hellenistic world or the Roman world or the Byzantine, etc., etc. And they were practicing their own religion. So that distinguished them from the others. So this is all historically mixed. And the manifestations we have seen let's say, anti-Semitism coming from the Christian church, from the Christian churches. We have also seen, let's say, the Nazi ideology, which didn't distinguish religion itself, but it related to the people as an ethnic group. So I think it's a very, and of course, you know, Christian, it's important to say here for your viewers that nothing of this, of course, is logical. Everything is an obsession. Everything is a conspiracy theory in the heads of the anti-Semites, of the people who hate the Jews. And often, the Jews for them can be rich, can be poor, can be cosmopolitan, can be close to themselves, can be communist, can be capitalist. And we see that in modern manifestations of anti-Semitism. What I want to say is that at the end of the day, the Jew in the head of somebody who hates Jews is everything they want it to be. So anti-Semitism is not a Jewish issue. It's a sickness of modern societies. The Jew here is just a scapegoat. It's just somebody who gets the problem or is accused of the problem the anti-Semite wants to address. So it's important to say that because to show that wherever it comes from, it has zero rational and moral basis.
Dr. Saltiel, your organization speaks of an increasing acceptance of the demonization of Israel. Is demonization of the state of Israel synonymous with hatred of Jews?
In this discussion, Christian, about anti-Semitism and Jew hatred in general, your question about Israel is very pertinent. You know, in many countries, for example, in Germany, in France, here in Switzerland, there are very strong laws against discrimination of an individual. Meaning, if I am attacked in the street as a Jew, the police will come and arrest the person who attacked me, and they will be going to jail due to the penal code. So for the anti-Semites, it's very difficult to express their feelings in today's modern societies. So a way they have found it is accusing the state of Israel. And the state of Israel, of course, as the only Jewish state in the world, is the Jewish collective, representing a big part of the world's Jewish population. And often, if you see, and of course, Israel is a democracy, Israel is a state like anybody else, and everybody can criticize Israel for their policies. However, we sometimes see that criticism of Israel goes beyond the regular framework of criticizing any other state, and often gets anti-Semitic connotations. So the accusations that we have seen against Jews during the Middle Ages, we see them being depicted against Israel today in a criticism of different people on different Israeli policies. So this is a phenomenon that scholars have called the new anti-Semitism, where Israel is targeted as a Jewish collective, and we call it anti-Zionism. And this is what we call this demonization of Israel being criticized and dealt with differently from the rest of the world. And it's a phenomenon that puts also the well-being of Jewish communities in jeopardy around the world. We are not Israeli citizens, but we have a relation to Israel as the Jewish state and the Jewish homeland, and also we have family and friends in Israel. But because people see us as supporters of Israel, whenever there are events in Israel, they attack synagogues or Jewish people around the world. So we are also becoming victims of this demonization of Israel, of this treatment of Israel as the worst country in the world. And unfortunately, here in Geneva, the Human Rights Council, we have this phenomenon. We have a lot of resolutions criticizing Israel, when, for example, we only now started condemning Russia, only recently for their invasion of Ukraine, whereas we have been condemning Israel for decades, and not only once, but 5 and more times every year. So this is just one of the issues that we are working on here in Geneva, to try and tell the people that they have to treat Israel like a normal country. Feel free to criticize it for whatever it does, but not using anti-Semitic statements and connotations when they do so.
So I understand you correctly. It's not the critic, it's, let's say, the intent of the critic.
100%. You know, the Jewish people are the first to criticize Israel. And you see the Israeli people, the voters of the Israeli government, are in the streets every day, and they complain all the time against Israeli policies. They are not, of course, anti-Semitic. It's all legitimate speech. We speak about the speech that goes beyond a certain limit, as you say, the intentions, or, for example, denying the state of Israel's right to exist, which is never when you criticize Russia or Iran or any other country in the world, don't you deny their right to exist. But only in Israel are there people who say Israel should not exist and we should wipe it off this earth. So that's what I'm saying about extreme criticism of Israel, which often go back into very pure anti-Semitism.
According to the World Jewish Congress poll in Germany, 30% of respondents think Jews used the Holocaust to advance their own agenda. 40% think Jews talk too much about the Holocaust. And half of the population thinks Germany has done enough to make amends for the Holocaust. At the same time, a growing majority lacks basic knowledge about the Holocaust. 60% cannot correctly say that 6 million Jews were murdered, according to the World Jewish Congress. In January, on the occasion of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, Pope Francis appealed to everyone, but especially to educators and families, to raise awareness in younger generations of the horrors of this dark side of human history. It must never be forgotten, so that we can build a future in which human dignity is never again trampled upon, Pope Francis said.